first off, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying healthy and safe. Just reach out to me if you ever need anything, okay? Reminder, email me. I'm here for you. Just let me know what's going on. I'll try and be as responsive as possible. And second, CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services on campus, is a great resource. And I shared with you on the email that I've used it before when I was an undergrad, 15, 16 years ago. But I highly recommend reaching out to someone and talking, because this is a crazy, isolating time. And it can just be really nice to talk to a professional. So I recommend that. Okay. All right. I'm going to look at Canvas right now. So we are in week 2. I'm going to scroll it down. And this is going to be couched in the Watch episode 3. There might be 2 videos. One is just me kind of going through the assignment sheet, and this is the kind of lecture version of it. So sprites, but not sprites or sprites or sprites. So sprites. Sprites are diminutive supernatural creatures, fairies, but this is something we're not studying this week, but maybe good to know. Also, sprites, or Ceratopteris thalictoides, by their Latin name, are ferns often used to make a home aquarium less oppressive. Sprites, but not the type of sprites that we're looking at this week. And then, of course, sprites.
I like the sprite in you.
That we all know about.
Hey, yo, kid, where's the party? Check it out, I'm Kid, and I kid you not, I like the Sprite. I like the Sprite a lot.
My name is Sprite, but I'm not playing, I like the Sprite.
All right, that's Kid and Play.
You know what I'm saying?
I like to kick it
An ad from the 90s. That's not the type of sprite that we're looking at. That is not the type of sprite that we're looking at. Sprites are also 2-dimensional bitmaps. As a reminder, a bitmap is a raster image, right? These are Photoshop images, different than vector images, which are typically your Illustrator images. They're the type that have these coordinates, the anchor points, right, that we looked at in Illustrator, that there's math essentially embedded in each one of these anchor points. There's a coordinate, and then also if they have these Bezier handles, that the calculus that would go into making those curves. Oh gosh. So the sprites that we're looking at, they're Photoshop images. They're PPI images, pixels per inch images. They're screen images, right? Our screens are made up of pixels. It's an image made up of tens or hundreds or thousands or millions or more of arrayed pixels, rectangles of a single color, or of rectangles of single colors, right? Arrayed. The more pixels in a given image, the higher the resolution, the greater potential for scaling up the image. Awesome. But more pixels equals larger file size, equals computer has to work harder. So sprites that we're talking about originated in the 1970s, some with calculator technology, but really used very regularly and kind of most popularly with arcade technology. So sprites are the things that are moving around this image. The character right there is composed of multiple sprites. And these are pixel art images, right? Sprite images are sort of, in a way, synonymous with pixel art images. It's a stylistic thing, but also a style that originated out of a necessity with the limitations of technology at the time. But we're going to access that style even though our technology can totally handle it. But we're in a situation right now where because we're all over the world and some people have access only to VPNs and things like that, that working with really small files, emailing really small files, downloading really small files is maybe a way forward right now, especially when everyone is trying to do things on the internet. Sprites originated with arcade games. One of the arcade games, a home arcade game that you all are probably definitely familiar with, is Super Mario Brothers, right? Incredibly simple game in a way. It's a 2D side-scrolling game, all composed of sprites. So we'll look at these games more later, but I want to kind of show you how it happens. So Mario, right, is a sprite. Pixel art. You can see it right there. Mario, totally. Just a few blocks of color that compose this human character, right, representing a human with just a few colors. Awesome. To animate sprites, a sprite sheet is created. and upload it into a game, the technology that does it. So this is an example of a sprite sheet that contains all of the information about the different Marios, the way they look and the way they move. So right here, Mario's walk, go even closer, is composed of only 3 sprites that make an animation. And let me show it to you. Right? It's a little frantic, it's a little hectic, because it's only 3 different poses cycling really quickly over a set period of time, right? But that's a sprite. Sprites are the thing we're making this week. But we need to take a look at animation first, because animation and sprites contain animation information, which is really important for a video game. And we're going to look at animation because it's magic. And here's a really early animation machine. So we're looking at early animation and the work that the artists and scientists did in the late 19th and early 20th century to breathe life into still images is what informed the video games of the 70s and 1970s and 1980s, as well as Pixar blockbusters that we watch today. So, what is animation? Animation is images in succession, time, that differ, change. So change over time, that's it. Depending on the quality of that change that happens over time, we perceive those images not as discrete things, but rather as fluid motion. Awesome, right? Image, change to image, change to image. And if the motions are just gentle enough, it can look like fluid motion when they're played back quickly in succession. This interesting, seemingly oppositional thing happened where entertainment and science were the earliest adapters and creators of new technologies to bring things to life, to animate. One of the first animation machines was called the phenakistoscope. It was invented by Joseph Plateau in 1833. And notice that it uses a circular disc with 9 images. So you hold the disc up to a mirror, and then you peer through the slits that are right there. And that sort of creates this strobe effect. And when you look through it, there's this sensation of motion. So phenakistoscope, the word comes from phenakistiko, which is Greek for to deceive or to cheat, and ops, which is eye or face. So a phenakistoscope is a thing that deceives the eye. It's an illusion. Notice the loop, right? We're also working with loops in this assignment this week. Notice how quickly the loop happens. The loop is all time and no time, so there really is no beginning or end. But all of these loops in these phenakistoscopes are created with very few images, and that's your challenge this week, is to use no more than 8 and no less than 3 images to create a looping motion. Another early person working with animation, kind of the forefather of animated imagery, is Edward Muybridge. And what's pretty exciting about Edward Muybridge, so you might be familiar with this clip, he quote-unquote discovered that when a horse is galloping, all 4 legs are not touching the earth at one time. And here, again, just like in other animations, just as in the phenakistoscope, we can see that this is broken down into discrete images. So that's image 6. You can see down here at the bottom left, image 7, image 8, image 9. You got it, right? 11, 12, 13. I just want to show you that it goes to 16, and then that's 2, right? So 16 is essentially 1 as well. So that's where the loop happens. The cool thing about Edward Muybridge is that this work they did with the horses, he did at Stanford University with Leland Stanford. But then because of that work, University of Pennsylvania was like, yo, what's up? That's a pretty cool thing you're doing. It brought him to Philadelphia, and he did a bunch of his studies with students and on the grounds of the University of Pennsylvania. So here is the wild contraption that he can create. Look, this is Penn Archives, University of Pennsylvania. So this camera house housed the array of cameras that he used to create these animations. So it'd be camera. You get it. And then as action happened across or in front of this camera house, the cameras would be timed to go off in succession to essentially create things like the horse animation that we saw right here, right? It's not composed with a video camera, like a film camera. This is done with just a bunch of cameras capturing their images and compiling them. All right, so the first cartoon animation, well, at least widely accepted as the first, is called Phantasmagory, and I want to look at that with you all really quickly too. It doesn't need to be sound because there wouldn't be sound when it was played. So I want you to observe a couple things as you watch a few minutes of this. What can happen to the cartoon body in an animation, right? You know, we recognize these as humans, as representations of humans, but they're cartoonized, and the rules are different. The physics are different. Different things can happen. Violent things can happen to these plastic malleable bodies. So objects acquire an agency and a personality, making them more like subjects that pull and suck and spit and attack and morph and interact with human characters. The other thing that I want you to notice is the instability of the line, not the jerkiness. That's more of a technical thing or a stylistic thing, but rather how the one line, that white line, is the one thing, a bottle say, and then no thing in particular, just a line. It sort of flattens out, and then a flower, and then an elephant, and then you get it. So the line is also everything. It's nothing and everything. This is really an exciting thing that happens within animation. And then also, notice the hands, right? You see them at the very beginning. And you see them at different points in the animation. So the hands, the intrusion of the author, the controller, the god, that establishes the scene, corrects the scene, manipulates the characters and the objects, and it demonstrates that this is a fabricated world. Keep that in mind for this project and as we move forward for the rest of the semester, that this is a construction of one's own imagination. It is a step outside of reality, and that's the magic of animation. It's an abstraction of the real. It's not trying to be the real, something hyper-representational. Rather, it aims for believability, a believability that is stable within the rules of its own cartoon world, and which is considered adjacent to our own real world, the viewer's world, the hand's world that interjects your world, right? Our own world. All right, so real quick, let's watch a bit of a film from, it says 1930s, it might be later than that, which is the Fleischer Animation Studio. So I'll include a link to this film in the canvas so you can watch it in its entirety and watch it over again without me talking over it. But the last thing I want to point out, in addition to the key artists being separate from the in-betweeners, the key artists having more status somehow than the in-betweeners, even though they're all creating images that essentially no one, when it's played back, no one will tell what's a key and what's an in-between frame. The celluloid, which is a cell animation, what's called cell animation, that's the clear paper, clear material that they're painting on. So that's the second thing I just kind of want to point out. The scrolling background I want to point out. That was what we just saw, that the long piece of paper for the background so that it could scroll behind the characters to make it seem like they're moving through space, at least as a sort of a side scroll sensation. Collage, in terms of this, in its earliest days of the kind of like mass-produced popular animation, collage was part of it. So it's sort of an exciting thing to think about and maybe kind of play with some of the ideas and look at some of the collage artists for inspiration moving towards the final project in this class. And finally, the division of labor. There's someone that does the sketch, there's someone that does the inking, and then there's someone that does the painting of the cell, and then there's someone that does the background, and then there's someone else that is responsible for taking a photographic image of each frame, right? So you have to break it down, this huge body of work, like an opera or something. Everyone has a role, and it all comes together as a Gesamtwerk, whatever the German word is for a big piece of work, right, to come together. A big piece of artwork, all-encompassing. All right, and then skipping over lots of the evolution of animation, it brings us back to sprites. So these are our characters that we're going to work with. They're very graphic, like the characters that we saw in the Fleischer Animation Studio, like Popeye, right? Just bold colors, blocks of colors. they're arranged in these sprite sheets, right? And their motions are broken down into blocks. But when put in sequence, they create fluid motion. Like this, right? So they look like a person, but they're an abstraction of a person, right? They're an abstracted representation of a person. They're an abstracted representation of a gorilla. They can have some more photorealistic elements to them, but upon closer inspection, you realize it's just a bunch of blocks of color put together. They can play with space, or they can just care about one 2D plane. And then finally, I just want to get you excited about abstraction. So yes, you can abstract a representation of a photorealistic representation of a person into blocks, of a person, an object into blocks of color. But don't limit your thinking to just abstracting a recognizable thing. Remember the non-objective abstractions we looked at the beginning of this course. So Piet Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie could be a great one to look at, right? Pixels. Or maybe you want to check out the work of Alma Thomas, another non-objective abstract artist that we looked at. Pixels, arrayed slightly differently, right? Not in a grid, but a broken down image, and fertile territory for creating some sort of animation. And then Frank Stella and his grids that he used. Remember the canvas that we looked in the Annenberg lobby? But maybe this could inspire an animation for you. So, your challenge this week is to create a looping animation in a very small canvas made up of 64 pixels on one side by 64 pixels on the other. So 4,096 pixels total. And you're going to play with those pixels and create something that will, by necessity, be abstracted, but will have life in it because of the sequence of images that you create. 3 images at least, and 8 images max. Okay? You decide how much time you need to spend on this. So, good luck. Make a sprite, make an animated GIF, and have fun. And reach out with questions. Peace.